In this video, I'd like to do an overview and introduction to the Sivetz roasters we use here at Galati. This is our half bag roaster. The Sivetz roaster is what's known as a single pass fluidized bed roaster. The single pass part of that description refers to the air passing through the roast chamber. And in this case, it's a single use of the air. There's another version of this roasting machine made in Europe that reuses the air. So the combustion chamber and the afterburner are one and the same. So that's a recirculating fluid bed roaster. This is a single pass fluid bed roaster. We feel that the single pass produces a much cleaner, better tasting coffee for kind of obvious reasons. You're not introducing smoke into the coffee chamber. The fluidized bed portion of the roasting of the roaster design refers to the roast chamber itself. Now, there are really two types of roasting machines in the world. Pardon that background noise, that's our walk-in freezer kicking on. Most roasting machines are the large cylinder drum roasters. And you can kind of think of those, I mean, the way I kind of like to present it is the Sivetz roaster is kind of the Macintosh computer in the world of Windows computers as far as roasters are concerned. So it's the Macintosh of roasters. And what that really means is that it's utilizing a different kind of principle that really thoroughly changes the way that you communicate and go about roasting. So in a radiant drum roaster, the coffee beans are loaded into a drum, and it's the drum that transmits the heat energy to the coffee beans. And in this case, the Sivetz roaster is using a fluidized bed of hot air. And that's what's going to actually not only levitate the coffee beans, thus creating the fluidized portion of the bed, but the air is also what's going to be roasting the coffee. So it's a convective roasting rather than radiant roasting that a drum roaster would have. And this convection roasting gives us a lot of advantages as far as the flavor profile of the coffee and just the cleanliness of the coffee and the efficiency of roasting. If you consider that the definition of roasting is first the driving off the moisture that's in the green beans of a coffee and then roasting the dry bean to an ideal roast temperature, then convection roasting has a lot of obvious advantages. Whereas in a radiant drum roaster, that driving off the moisture can take anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. In a Sivetz roaster, this is done within 2 minutes of roasting, and we get down into the business of roasting the dry beans, giving us a total roasting time of about 8 to 10 minutes as opposed to, say, 15 to 30 minutes on a traditional style roaster. The other advantage of this is that because we're using the air itself to roast the coffee rather than a hot surface, it means that no surface is hotter than the actual roasting temperature of the coffee bean itself. So what I mean by that is that the air is the hot part. The surfaces the beans are in contact with are less than that temperature, so we don't have any burning or scorching that's occurring. The other advantage of that is because we're using air to lift, levitate, and agitate the beans around, it's an excellent way to clean the debris off the coffee beans while roasting. And what will happen is that the beans are going to roast inside this chamber here, and as the debris is broken off, that debris being lighter will come across over to this flue area here and collect in the shaft can very, very quickly, very effectively. And I'll show you what I mean by that when we're actually getting into the business of roasting later on. But let's just kind of go through the different parts of the roasting machine to kind of give you an idea how the machine is set up. Over here is the combustion chamber. This is where the gas flame will come to heat the air into this tube-like structure, which funnels the air into the blower unit itself. In that blower unit, you can kind of see there's a circular item there that then blows the air up into the roast chamber itself. The roast chamber is at you can kind of see the slant here uh, this slant area is where the coffee beans will rise up and then come back down on this down the slanted side. So the coffee beans are rising up the straight side, coming back down on the slanted side. That gives you a reason why you have the curvature of that top part of the roaster. Right above it is the green bean collection area for the next batch. What will happen is this roaster has a pneumatic lift, and you'll see this as we're roasting again a little later on. We lift the beans up through this pneumatic lift. They're stored into this charge can, and when you're ready to do your roast, you drop the beans into the chamber itself. I mentioned already this area here is where the effluent air, exhaust air is going out through, collecting the shaft in this soft cyclone, and then from there, goodness gracious, that's our air compressor going on that runs all the shaft collects in this shaft cyclone, and then over the top there's the afterburner, which is going to burn off any effluent smoke coming off the roaster. And right here is the control panel, and which will give us readouts of the air temperature coming into the roaster and the current bean temperature and what to set at. Once the coffee beans are roasted, they come out into this cooling bin area here. We'll bring the coffee out, let it cool down in that roast chamber. It's one of the other nice things about this device is since we're using air to roast the coffee, when the terminal temperature is reached, we can shut off the gas and begin doing our initial cool down in the roast chamber itself, giving us control of the cooling of the coffee as well as the roasting of coffee. The important thing to remember here is that when you're roasting coffee, it's not just heating the coffee beans. You've got to actively cool the coffee beans once the desired roast temperature is reached. So what we have to do is physically cool the coffee beans. Otherwise, the beans, right about, say, about 420 degrees and greater, they become exothermic, and they will continue roasting themselves unless we actively cool the coffee beans down. And that's going to happen in the same chamber that we roast the coffee itself. So the coffee beans are heated in this chamber. When the terminal temperature is reached, the gas automatically shuts off. There is a water quench that will do a quick spray inside the roast chamber that will help start cooling the beans down. That water is immediately evaporated. We're not quenching the coffee beans in the cooling bin later where the beans would soak in that water, but in the roast chamber itself where that water becomes quickly evaporated. And then once the coffee beans cool about 100 degrees in that roast chamber, we then go ahead and bring them out into the secondary cooling chamber. And this kind of speeds along the roast itself and allows us to turn more roasts per hour. So the nice thing about this roaster is that it's pretty foolproof as far as when you're doing production roasts. We're roasting by temperature, not by the color of the beans. And this is kind of one of the important differences on a Sivetz roaster, is that the final temperature, the final desired roast is determined strictly by temperature. And the roaster is pretty accurate to about 1 degree in roast temperature, and this gives us a lot of control over the roasts themselves. Okay, so that's kind of the general overview of the roasting machine. When we come back, we'll walk you through the different steps of operating the roaster itself.